All right, last time we talked about what you thought you might take on a trip across the Atlantic, and we saw what they really did take, and quite a difference. A couple more things that we didn't mention before. And that is, there's what we saw. Oh, okay, I don't have it on there. In addition to what's on this list, we do know that they did not bring any musical instruments at all. I know some of you would have wanted to bring your piano. That wouldn't work. They did bring a book of Psalms, which would of course been used for singing. These were prepared by Henry Ainsworth, a biblical scholar and dissenter who had fled to Amsterdam from England. They had Dr. Fuller's medical books. I think we mentioned that. Oh, they brought Miles Standish's canon. So they brought a canon along with them. Miles Standish was not a separatist. He was one of the strangers that were on board. And they brought him along for his military acumen. Let's see. No cattle or livestock. And I thought I had a picture of, I guess we'll have to wait. And they did bring 2 dogs, which I'll show you a picture in a few minutes. Now it says here that they had many cats. So that wasn't on this list, but apparently they had cats and even more rats. They didn't bring them with them. They just happened to be there on the ship. Okay, because there's always rats on board. All right, so they set sail from Plymouth on September the 6th, 7 weeks after leaving London. So that's a long time to mess around with all the stuff they had to do in order to leave. And of course, if you're leaving in September, what's that mean for when you get there? It takes a couple months to get there.
It's going to be cold.
It's going to be cold. You got to go out and plant crops when you get there? No. So they left too late in the year to really be the best time. That's what happened. Okay. Next, we want to consider clothing, because this is an area that has been very much misunderstood. Clothing. Usually, how many of you were in this school in kindergarten or first grade? Okay. Who was your kindergarten teacher? Mrs. Kajemi, and Mrs. Henry was your first grade teacher. Okay, so now one of the things they always did was dress up for Thanksgiving, right? And kindergarten always dressed as, you know what you dressed as in kindergarten? The Indians, and first grade as the Pilgrims, okay? So, how did you dress when you dressed as Pilgrims? Devin?
The guys had that hat with the buckle on it.
Yeah, black hat with buckle. Yeah. What else?
The girls had like little floral fairy dresses. Yeah, like little bonnets and aprons.
Little bonnets, aprons. Okay. So, because I left my tablet at home, I have some maneuvering around I have to do every time I want to change a slide. And it's still not working. Well, technical difficulties here. Let's see. There we go. All right, so that's the traditional way that people think of as the Pilgrims dressing, right? Is that pretty much what you see all the time? Thanksgiving? Yeah. None of that's true. None of that is how they dress. Here's how they really look. All right, here's how a typical man would dress. He would have a felt hat. something called a ruff. It's called a doublet, which would be like this coat, have cuffs. Breeches would be what he would wear for pants. He'd have garters to keep his pants up on his legs. Stockings and shoes. What's missing here that you usually see all over the traditional pilgrim outfit? Buckles. None on the hat, none on the coat or the pants, or no buckle, or the shoes. No buckles. Buckles hadn't been invented yet. So how they got on the traditional pilgrim outfit, I don't know. All right, how about the ladies? Well, here's how they dress. So she's got what's called a coif on her head. This is called a shift. She's got a waistcoat because it goes down to the waist. Apron. That part's right. They did wear an apron. Petticoat and shoes. And one of the things that is associated with the pilgrims is that they dress in all black. Well, that's not true either. So even in these clothing here, it looks kind of dark. They did wear bright colors. They, red and green and all kinds of things. So they dressed normally for their times. Now, once they were about 6 years old, or called upgrown, the children dressed like miniature adults. So when about 6 years old and older, they look just like they're adults in the way they dressed. Until that time, what did they wear? Until they were 6 years old. They all wore, boys and girls wore like a gown, kind of like a dress. And that went on for a long time. You look at even old pictures, you'll see babies looking like they're wearing a dress, no matter what they are. Somebody mentioned bring shoes. Who said bring shoes? One of you said bring shoes. Megan? All right. This guy was thinking ahead. He brought 126 pairs of shoes because he knew that they couldn't buy any once they were there. No one knew what kinds of materials they would find, so William Mullins thought it was better to be safe than sorry. He brought 126 pairs of shoes and 13 pairs of boots to sell to the other colonists in America. And they questioned, I wonder if he brought that many pairs of stockings. And there's a hat, felt hat, might look like that they wore. It's called a monmouth cap. All right, the tools that they brought, we talked about. Here's a drawing that somebody made of their tools. So you can see a shovel and a pick here. You can look around and see different tools they're using. Another shovel. Can't see that very well. It looks like some kind of a saw that's using there. There's the cradle that they brought. Here's what a pot looked like that they would bring. They cook over an open fire. There's another picture of a pot, an iron cooking pot. This one is believed to have been owned by Miles Standish. Here's a picture of the helmet and armor that they brought. And we mentioned guns or musket. Here's the kind of shooting firearm that they had. This one is, anybody know what this is for? This cord, the little rope-like thing? Joey?
Is it to clean the gun after? No?
No. Can you see? I don't know, you can barely see maybe what's happening on the end here. But that's what you would light, and then the fire would go up here and set the gunpowder off to shoot out the shot. So this is before they had flintlocks. Flintlocks where the hammer would strike the flint and make a spark and send the gunpowder exploding and send the shot out. But this was the kind where you had to actually light a fuse to shoot the gun. So you're taking aim for quite a while waiting for that fuse to get to the gunpowder. And the animal better not move, while you're waiting. So, not as useful as you might think. Okay, here's a picture of the Bible they brought. And the Bible they did bring was called the Geneva Bible. You can see down here the Bible. It was printed at Geneva. The Geneva Bible was a Bible translated into English in Geneva, Switzerland during the Reformation. And it had study notes. It's the first Bible I know of that had notes in it. And the notes were written by the famous reformers, John Calvin and Henry Bullinger, Martin Bucer, John Knox. So it was a pretty good Bible. And that's one reason why King James didn't like it, because the study notes seemed to advocate a republican form of government rather than a monarchy, and had notes that went against the idea of the divine right of kings. And so that's why James wanted to have another translation. But this is what the Pilgrims, the Puritans used. They wanted nothing to do with that King James Bible. Also, this is the first Bible that ever used verse numbers. We'll forgive them for that. But it does make it easier to find what you're looking for. Chapters have been there, but this is the first one that had verses. They also brought a psalter. Here's what that looked like. There's the good old Psalm 100. Shout to Jehovah, all the earth. Serve Jehovah with gladness. Before him come with singing. Can't read that. I know that Jehovah, He God is. So rewording Psalm 100 so they could sing it. Oh, here are the dogs they brought. They brought an English Mastiff and an English Springer Spaniel. I don't know, what use would those be? I don't know. The Spaniel, I guess, might be good for hunting. I don't know about the Mastiff. Maybe it'd be good for scaring off Indians or Spanish. All right, so here's a picture of the Mayflower and the Speedwell in Dartmouth Harbor before they left. Well, as they're getting ready to leave, and you know that the Speedwell wasn't able to go, so they reduced the number of passengers from 120 to 102, and they squeezed onto the Mayflower. So let's take a look at the occupants of the Mayflower. All right, there were 44 separatists, and they didn't call themselves that, by the way. They usually called themselves saints, because they knew they belonged to Christ. And among them were 17 men, 10 women, and 14 children from Leiden in Holland. Those are ones that had gone to Holland. And then William and Mary Brewster and William Bradford came from Scrooby. They were among the group that was in England that was going to go. And much of their number was reduced. They decided not to squeeze in on this voyage. All right, so 44 separatists. Then there were 58 what they called strangers. They were strangers to the gospel, strangers not part of their congregations. And they were largely from London and southeast England. So these are men that probably couldn't find work, and so they're looking to go to the New World to make a life. They were good members of the Church of England, so religiously they would have been at odds. And they were members of the Church of England because that's where they were born and they were baptized, not because of any inner conviction of their own, I mean, as far as we know. So they were just seeking economic opportunity. Let's see, now I can tell you a little bit more about the strangers. Oh, by the way, the strangers kind of resented the separatists being in charge. You know, there's more of the strangers than there are of the separatists, but the separatists were the ones that organized this voyage. And they stoutly refused all attempts to convert them to the truth. And you can imagine the separatists are trying to share the gospel with these people, and they just didn't really want to hear it. They got tired of hearing the gospel preached to them. And so that led to considerable irritation and loud arguing. The saints kind of maybe lorded it over them, the strangers, a little bit too, because they let them know that, hey, we are in charge here. So don't complain too much. Okay, among the strangers were a man called Miles Standish. I mentioned him before. Miles Standish was a hardened professional soldier. And so he was along for that reason. He was around 36 or so years of age. He was nicknamed Captain Shrimp because he was so short. He had red hair and a complexion that changed to crimson when he flew into a rage. He's the only one of the Pilgrim leaders who never joined the church at Plymouth. The next person is John Alden. John Alden was a cooper by trade. What was a cooper, first of all? Anybody know what a cooper was? Devin? Yeah, barrel maker and repairer. So why would he be important to have on board the ship on the way over? Why would you want a cooper on the ship? Because he was originally designated just to go over and come back. Why would you need a cooper? Michaela? Right, you need to have somebody that can repair barrels on board ship. And so they had a professional there to do that. We'll see that later on. He would ask if he could stay. He was tall, blonde, very powerful in physique.
Yep.
Like anybody you know here? He was one of the strongest men in Plymouth. So, you know, if you made a movie, he could be the leading character. Also on board was Priscilla Mullins. She is famous from Longfellow's poem, Henry W. Longfellow's poem, called The Courtship of Miles Standish. Have any ever read The Courtship of Miles Standish? No? Have any of you ever read anything by Longfellow? Evangeline, Hiawatha, The Midnight Rider, Paul Revere. None of you have read anything by Longfellow. I need to talk to your English teachers. Longfellow is one of the greatest poets in American history. Well, he wrote, and I'll tell you, when I was in school, we used to memorize large portions of his poems, especially The Midnight Rider, Paul Revere. We had to memorize that whole thing, but also parts of other things, including The Courtship of Miles Standish. Well, in this story that he tells, Longfellow tells, Miles Standish is rather enamored with Priscilla Mullins. And so he, but being shy, he asks John Alden to go to Priscilla to see whether she was interested in him. You know, you've done that, some of you maybe. Ask so-and-so if they like me, you know, that kind of thing, right? And so that's what he did. But when John Alden got to Priscilla and asked her, hey, you know, what do you think about Miles? She said, according to the poem, why don't you speak for yourself, John Alden? And so he did, and they ended up getting together, and they got married, and poor Miles was left out. Unfortunately, none of that's true. Miles Standish was already married. He was quite a little bit older than Priscilla. He had no inclination to fall for her. But the one thing is true is John Alden and Priscilla did themselves fall in love and get married. And that was probably one reason why John, I mean, they got married later. It wasn't like when they first got there. but eventually, maybe one reason why John said, you know, I'd like permission to stay with the group instead of going back to England. All right, so that's Priscilla Mullins, married to John Alden. She may have been a separatist, but I'm not sure which group she's in. Then there was Stephen Hopkins, who brought his 7-month pregnant wife Elizabeth and 3 small children. His son was born at sea and named him Oceanus.
What should we name him? I don't know. We're in the ocean. Let's name him Oceanus. That just seemed like a better way of thinking.
Stephen Hopkins later would write some history of the colony. We had a very interesting experience at Plymouth Plantation when I took a group there one time. By the way, have any of you ever been to Plymouth Plantation near Boston? One person? How long ago was it? Okay. I don't know whether you were old enough to appreciate or not, but when you're there, you are actually talking to the people that we're reading about. In other words, those that are there are acting as if they are the real people. They carry on their lives just like people did on that date in 1628, I think is the year that they've chosen. They've rebuilt this to look just like Plymouth Plantation was, and they are living that way during the day. So you'll go by, you'll see them cooking supper just like they would have been, or lunch, or out in the fields working, or building. You see how they live. It's really neat. And you can talk to people that you've read about. One time I was there, I came across, I think it was William Brewster. I can't remember who it was. One of the leaders, anyway. I talked to him for a while, and he knew my wife's ancestor who was on the Mayflower. Oh yeah, he's working with so-and-so people. It's so neat. But anyway, one time I took some students there, and because we go in April, there's not as many tourists, and so we spent, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes to an hour with Stephen Hopkins, just sitting in his backyard talking, and it was so neat. And at one point, he talked about the book he had written about their early years there, and in fact, your sister, I think it was Faith that was there, that he sent in to his house to get the book off his shelf. I thought, you were trusting a student to go in and get this valuable book, and she came out and he had her and some others reading from it. It was a pretty neat experience. So I highly recommend if you're ever in that area, go to Plymouth Plantation. It's the best historical site I've ever been to. Unfortunately, I've tried for a number of years to get another student group to go there, but no one signs up for it. So I kind of quit trying unless I hear. Although I think it was last year or 2 years ago, my U.S. history class said, yeah, we want to go. And so I had it on the mini-term, and 2 people signed up. So, okay, we can't do it with 2 people, obviously. Okay, so but keep that in mind if you want to go. All right. Next we have on the list John Billington of London. Now he would be destined to win distinction as the only Pilgrim father to be hanged. He came with his wife and 2 sons. They were that kind of a family. They were always getting in trouble. Bradford called them one of the profanest families amongst them. We'll come up to his sons later. His sons will do some things that will be noteworthy. Among the passengers also were 18 indentured servants who were brought along to do the heaviest kind of labor, such as felling trees, hewing timbers, building houses, clearing and plowing fields, tending crops, gathering the harvest, and whatever their masters ordered. 11 of these were strong young men. 4 of them were poor orphans who were not so strong from London. All right, so indentured servants. Then there were 5 hired men who were hired to serve 1 year. In addition to the cooper, there were 2 ordinary seamen and 2 master mariners. One to captain the longboat. And in addition, on the ship, they had a longboat to use to get off the ship, and they had to have a captain to do that. And the other to return and retrieve those separatists that they left behind to bring them back. But unfortunately, both of them died several months later. There were 30 officers and crew. They were, as you would expect on a ship, an ungodly and intemperate lot. Now, one of them used to taunt the weak and sick by saying that he expected to bury half of them at sea and to make merry with what they had. In other words, he just kept mocking them. Oh, you're all going to die, and I'm going to have fun with your possessions. Well, they returned some gentle condemnation to him, and then he would curse and swear most bitterly. Well, one morning he was stricken with something, and as is recorded, the proud and very profane young man was dead by afternoon, and his body was the first to go over the side. In common, all these people are lower class. The average age was 32, and only one man was over 60. This is the Mayflower at sea. See, there were 3 pregnant women on board on the lower deck, the between deck. Of course, they had to try to find room to cook in here as well. But you can see, just from this picture, it's very, very crowded. Let's talk about, let's see if we can talk about what the routine. Okay, so they set sail from Plymouth on September 6th, and had how many of these people had been on the ocean before? The passengers. Probably none of them. Maybe a couple had been on. Not, you know, because going from Holland to England doesn't really count as ocean. But they're out there in the ocean now. How many of you have ever been on the ocean? Okay. In an ocean liner. What kind of boat were you in? Cruise ship. All right. Now those are big enough that you don't really feel the waves too much, right? That's what I've heard. Is that right? Yeah. But if you're on a smaller ship, and remember, you know, this isn't all that big. What's going to happen? Yeah, back and forth. It's kind of like I'm feeling now with my vertigo. You know, you're dizzy and you get nauseous, and then what happens next? You throw up. Now, most of them can't throw up over the side because they're down here. Yeah. So you can imagine what that was like. And I don't know if you're like me, if you even smell throw up, it makes you want to throw up. So that was a problem. When it was storming, water seeped down through there. Remember, it's September, October, so it's cold. Cold rain is coming in that became wet and cold. They couldn't bathe or wash or even dry their clothes or bedding, so everything's wet. Buckets functioned as toilets, and whenever you could go up on deck and throw it overboard, but not during a storm. So, you know, they're sloshing around. You can imagine that. If you've ever been in a porta potty, just imagine that for several months down here. All right. When cooking could occur, it was done with charcoal fires in metal braziers, or braziers, I should say, set in, yeah, not braziers, braziers set in sandboxes. Now, if you go to Boston, you can also see Plymouth, or you can also see Mayflower 2, which is a replica of the Mayflower. They actually sailed it from England over to Boston, and you can see all the things that I'm talking about. It's just like it was, and they have people on board that are the sailors that you can ask questions that are pretending to be the real sailors. Steve?
What happened to the actual Mayflower?
No one knows for sure, because there were a lot of ships named Mayflower back then, so no one's for sure which Mayflower that's on different records is the one. So it's presumed that this one was used as a merchant vessel for years after, but it's difficult to tell for sure. Let's see. So during storms, they couldn't cook, so they just had cold food. All right, so let's talk about the routine. When they got up, in the morning, first thing is they had their daily prayers. Or the morning prayers, I should say. Then they would have breakfast. Okay, a good breakfast. What would they have for breakfast? Well, what do you have? How many of you eat breakfast? You know, people who eat breakfast get better grades. Study show. All right, so what do you eat for breakfast? Cereal and Pop-Tarts. A healthy, what kind of cereal? Sugar cereal?
Not good cereal.
So some sugar-coated stuff?
Yeah.
So yeah, good healthy start to the day. Get your sugar high. What do you eat for breakfast?
Maybe I'm cereal with like a couple of granola bars.
Does anybody eat a healthy breakfast?
I
What do you eat?
Toast and eggs.
Toast and eggs? Okay, that's better. What do you have?
Eggs.
Eggs? Yeah, that's what I usually have, eggs, whatever I can throw in there. All right, well, they had cheese and a hard dry biscuit. If cooking was allowed, they might have some porridge. All right, cheese and a hard dry biscuit was breakfast. Now, they would have a meal at midday, lunchtime. So lunch, I'm sure, is a better meal, right? So they would mix it up a little bit. Instead of having cheese and biscuit, they would have biscuit and cheese.
Ooh.
If they had good weather, they would cook peas pottage, boiled saltfish, pork, or beef, and any fresh bonito or porpoise that they might be able to catch as they're sailing along. So depending on the weather, they might get something better than just the biscuit and cheese. Now, these sound like heavy meals? Well, for supper they had a light meal, they called it, because this was considered to be pretty heavy stuff. So they had a light supper consisting of just whatever little things they had around. Just eat very little before then retiring for the night and going to bed as best they could. But you can imagine after a month or so, eating dried peas and salt cod might get a little old. Even pottage with porridge might get a little old. All right. Well, some interesting things happened on the way over. We had the one death of the sailor that was mocking the Pilgrims, and then we had a near death of someone else. His name was John Howland. Oh, before I get to that, there was another death besides the sailor, a servant by the name of William Button. He was 12 years old. Just 4 days before they arrived at land, he died. And he died because he refused to eat fruit. That he was saying, look, you need to eat this, and so he got scurvy and died. By the way, that sailor who died died of a disease that no one could figure out what it was, and nobody else got it. The separatists certainly saw the hand of God in that. Stephen?
That sounds like really suspicious, like they just threw him overboard and then said that.
Well, the captain of the ship wouldn't have allowed that.
Okay.
Now, he really was sick. You attribute evil actions on the part of the separatists here. But Button refused to drink the lemon juice to prevent scurvy, so he was the only one of the Pilgrims to succumb to the disease, which was most unusual, because usually on board ship like that for long periods of time, many people would die. Some speculate that the reason that these people remained healthy all the way across may be because the ship had previously been used as a vessel to carry wine, and that the alcohol in the wine, every once in a while barrels will break, and the wine having splashed on all the interior of the ship, the alcohol might have sterilized it to some extent. So that might be one explanation of why they all did so well coming across, and only one person died of sickness. There was almost another casualty, however, but it looks like we're going to run out of time for me to tell you that. So tomorrow I'll tell you about John Howland and why his survival was so important for American history.